The last movie on named ranges. Named ranges are great, but they create some problems. When you copy a worksheet with a named range, you will inadvertently create a worksheet scope named range, which you may not want to do. When you reference cells in a formula that are associated with a named range, Excel will automatically apply those names in your formula, which is something you may not want. And if you use the Apply Names functionality, you'll be able to undo that while you're in the session with Excel, but once you close your workbook, there's no way to reverse the application of those names in your formulas. And lastly, when you delete a cell or a region that's associated with a named range, you don't also delete the named range, you create an error in that named range. And you'll have to manually either correct the error or delete the named range. So I'm in Excel, and I'm going to set up a named range by pressing the Control F3 key to get the Name Manager dialog box, left-clicking New, and I'm going to set up a range that has a workbook scope. Refers to Sheet 1 A1, that's fine. Left-clicking OK, close that. So I have one named range. I'm going to left-click off of that, and I'm going to create a copy of this sheet by left-clicking it and then holding down the Control key, moving over a little bit. I get my plus key with the worksheet, releasing. I have a copy now of Sheet 1. And when I Control F3 to get the Name Manager, it shows me that I have two named ranges, and I only set up one. The second named range, which is listed at the top and it's selected, is on this sheet, and it was created because there was a workbook scope named range on the sheet that I copied. This is something you have to be careful about, because as shown in a prior movie, it's the worksheet level scope that will take precedence if you have a named range that's the same name as a workbook scope name range. So it's a good idea to set up all your name ranges before you copy any worksheets. The second problem that you can run into, and I have cell A1 selected, and I'm going to define a name using the name box and call it my range, enter, is that when you're building a formula, and if I reference that cell and enter, Excel will automatically apply the name that's associated with that cell or a region. It'll do the same thing for a region. That may or may not be what you want to have happen. But if your intention is to build a relative reference, I'm going to put a value in there. When I copy this formula down, it's going to, of course, point to cell A1 every single time, no matter where I put that formula, because the name range inherently is an absolute reference. So if I want cell C2 to point to cell A2, that's not going to happen. You'll have to actually go in and change that formula manually. The next issue that might be problematic is that you cannot reverse the application of the named ranges in your formulas. I've got a simple formula, cell A1 plus B1, and I'm going to name cell A1 and cell B1. And of course, my formula doesn't reference either one of those named ranges yet. We have first and second. In order to have my formula convert to a named range reference, I need to apply those names. And I have first and second. I can select both of them, left-click OK. And now those names have been applied in my formula. Now, since I'm in a session in Excel, and I haven't closed my workbook yet, I can, of course, undo that and redo it. But once I close my workbook, I lose the memory of those undo and redo steps. And when I open it back up, there's no functionality that allows you to reverse the application of the names. Lastly, there's a problem with deleting named ranges, and I'm going to name a range. Cell A1 is called My Range. Control F3, we get the Name Range dialog box, and we see My Range sitting there. I'm going to close that. If I delete this cell, right-clicking to get the shortcut menu, delete, I'll shift the cells left, that's fine. Say OK. Control F3 to get the Name Range dialog box. I still have my named range, my range, but it's producing an error now. Just because I deleted the cell, Excel doesn't automatically delete the name range that's associated with that cell. Fortunately, there's a filter that you can filter on all of the names with errors. And we only have one name And so the filter didn't actually do anything different than what was already displayed. But you can select these and delete them, or correct them, or change them, edit them, either way. So those are the main issues with dealing with named ranges. When you copy a worksheet that has a named range, you will inadvertently create a worksheet level scope named range. When you're building a formula that references a region or a cell that's associated with a named range, Excel will automatically apply that named range in your formula, which will create an absolute reference for you, which may not be what you want. Once you use the Apply Names functionality and close your workbook, you can't reverse the application of those names in your formula. And lastly, deleting a cell or a region that's associated with a named range doesn't automatically delete that named range. It creates an error for you with that named range.